Hey everyone, Tactics here, and in this video I'll be taking a look at the other wing end boss here of Amirdrassil on Mythic difficulty, LARODAR, Avatar of Ash. We've already, of course, covered Nimue. You can find that video over on my channel, but basically here we're going to be covering all of the new stuff you need to deal with on Mythic difficulty, some useful WeakAuras, method raid tools, just pre-prep to help you get this boss down, and just our general strategy for the fight phase by phase here, which hopefully helps you and your team get this boss down. Like my other Mythic guides, I am going to assume you have a baseline knowledge here of the heroic mechanics, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time with those. So with that in mind, let's talk pre-raid setup. So if you look at our MRT note over here on the side, you'll notice a few groups here, and these are the firefighter quote-unquote teams that we have. Basically on Mythic, to actually clear the fire, you need 3 people combined to kind of create a chain from the seed here, and that will then allow you to remove the fire using the energy from that seed. So basically you have one player. The first player is going to be tethered in a green circle, basically the length of this circle here around the seed. They click the seed, and then they will get a small circle around them, which the second player in the chain needs to run into. So you basically need to stack on top of the first player to get the second part of the circle. You don't need to actively click the seed a second time. So the second player runs into the first player, they'll get a circle around them as well, and then the third player needs to run into the second player, similarly to what the second player did to the first player, and then you'll have your 3 chains that you can extend, to remove the fire. So you need a total of 3 groups to do this within phase to help get rid of the roots, like you would on normal or heroic rather. You can have a 4th chain here, again notably melee players here are in the 4th chain, just use spare energy potentially at the start of the second phase. And again, melee, because they're going to be losing uptime in the actual first phase here, and that's why this is all ranged and healers basically doing it here, and this is kind of like a backup thing. And then you have actual backups here in case any of these players can't do it. You have inserts here in case you need them. You know, whether there's a death or someone accidentally gets the debuff to do the chain, etc., because you can only do it once, of course. So 4 firefighter teams, some backups, that should help you there. Again, only one person clicks. That's a mistake I've heard a lot of people making. They've all 3 of them tried to click. Only one person needs to click. Another thing for orb soaks here, it's a little different on Mythic. I'll go into it exactly when we do the phase 1 walkthrough, but basically you can't have the same people soaking every single orb, and so of course the handy dandy Northern Sky WeakAura here comes into can be useful. We actually didn't use it for this, so this is an option here. You can assign people to soak each of the orbs. Of course 5 orbs happen per spawn on Mythic difficulty here. And basically, if you soak them, you can assign people to soak them and get stack, etc. With this WeakAura. It's a little bit confusing, honestly, and we just kind of did a spread and YOLO'd it. I don't think it's mandatory to use this WeakAura, but potentially, if you're running into orb soak issues, you can set up this WeakAura to assign players to do that, which can be useful. The last thing to set up is for phase 2 here, and that's just CC assignments for the actual Trent ads. So you can see we have a bunch of different assignments based on markers that we've pre-placed on the ground, and then we'll just help buy you a little bit of time before they actually start coming into the center area and potentially start filling up the center with fire, right? So having these pre-assigned CCs can be pretty useful. I think notably too, we actually swapped the rogue and the boomkin here to be circle and the boomkin to be star, just because we would then tank the boss relatively close to these square and circle marks, or sorry, skull and circle marks, and that will let our melee, who are doing CCs, actually maintain decent uptime on the boss while still being able to quickly get their CC, whereas range could be a little bit more spread, right? So that's why we did that. So those are the 3 big things there for pre-prep. Otherwise, let's start with phase 1 here and kind of what's changed in this phase. All right, going into the poll here. So one of the big things here is there's a new debuff in this first phase, and that's called Igniting Growth. Only cast in phase 1 here, and basically what's going to happen is it goes out on the entire raid for 15 seconds, and while it's out, you'll be dropping fire beneath your feet based on how close you are to existing puddles. So the closer you are to existing puddles, the less often you will drop these fire puddles on the ground. So you're going to see the raid generally kind of cluster here. Here's the Igniting Growth going out. You have the range kind of clustered back there, and melee is kind of going to group up here and going to stutter step together, as you see, towards along the edge of this already existing puddle here. because of course there's going to be a tank charge during this. So we're going to continue now melee, stutter stepping backwards, dropping our flame puddles, eating up as little space as possible while the other tank goes and runs out with the boss there for the charge, just like you would on heroic difficulty. Boom, hit. Watching this debuff timer here, big on your screen, and as soon as it's done, we're going to reposition now quickly because there's going to be a Blazing Thorns cast, and we don't want the boss to be completely surrounded by fire when this happens. It makes soaking a little bit harder, and this is what I'm talking about. These are the orbs I'm talking about soaking. You'll get a permanent debuff here by soaking these orbs. It lasts the entire duration of the fight here, and basically each stack is 250% increased damage. So you can't constantly soak these. Basically how it works out is everyone is perfectly fine to eat a soak. That's fine. Your first stack is fine. Once you go to get your second soak, you may need to use a personal there. And to get your third soak as like a DPSer, you either need to pop a major personal or an immunity. Similarly, tanks can pop a personal on that third one and be fine, but the fourth one is pretty scary. So you have a decent amount of leeway here. The goal is to push the boss around the 8th cast of these swirlies and orbs, so that's a total of 40 debuffs, and as you can see here, the boss actually got one, so it's not the end of the world if the boss gets a soak, and particularly if he only gets a single soak. If he gets a couple, then it can be problematic with the tank charge coming out or the Raging Inferno cast, but usually one going in is not really a big deal. So with that kind of leeway, with the leeway of having immunities and tanks soak more than 2, you have more than enough people around to soak all of those orbs. So just make sure you aren't soaking until you're dead, essentially. Don't panic if the boss gets a stack here. Going out here, tank debuff. The Brambles theme is going, right? There's 3 of them, as you can see, kind of chained together there, just spitting all this fire away. They, of course, focus the Brambles first. The Brambles are then hard focused by the DPS. We had a healing kind of assignment on them. So, weird things with GS. Do not GS immediately. It's a little weird, whereas if you GS when this Brambles at 0% health for some reason, it'll consume your GS. Guardian Spirit, sorry, for Holy Priest, if you're using a Holy Priest. A little bit weird, so keep that in mind. But we had a rotation. We had 3 paladins, so we assigned, lay on hands across a bunch of these Brambles, various individual healing cooldowns, and of course, if GS wasn't consumed, a single GS would be available for every single one, which is quite useful to just pump healing into these Brambles. Well, of course, everyone is soaking these orbs here, and we're tanking relatively close to the Brambles here, just so that right after this charge, it's going to go out, boom. Notably, the Brambles will prevent fire from spawning here, which is nice, so note that as well. And then we go right back, tank the boss in the Brambles here, just so everyone's in the safe spot and maintains uptime here. And again, you're just going to be constantly dealing with these Blazing Thorns, the dodges here with the orb soaking, so make sure you're getting those. And then you're just going to go into the phase, and this phase is just going to repeat from here, essentially. And what's going to happen is you're going to do this essentially 2 full times, and then on the 3rd time, your goal is to just push the boss before the actual next Raging Inferno is cast here. And again, it's all about timings, right? So watch boss positioning. You want to be relatively close to the edge out of this because a charge is going to happen, and then shortly after that, you're going to get the Igniting Growth debuffs again, meaning you're going to be dropping fire, so you need to be very, very careful. Usually, again, you don't want a group be using the seed in the middle when the actual debuff is out on the raid. You don't need to actually be using this at all until the actual root starts to come out, because again, your primary goal is to hit those roots immediately, and as soon as you've hit those roots, then you can clear the rest of the fire. So that's kind of the goal here. And again, Igniting Growth debuff is going to come out, I believe, after this charge is when it's going to come out. And then, of course, you're going to see us, again, stutter step as a raid, or as a melee stack, rather, along the edge here. And range are kind of just spread out further along. So here's Igniting Growth. We're just going to stutter step into this cubby here. Fill up the space because we have it, right? Don't cut along the middle here. Stay near previous fire. And just stutter step as you spawn fire here. And keep moving along in this direction here. And look how much space we still have, right? So this is really, really good for space. We could have done this terribly, right? But it's very, very important to stay together as a melee stack, just so you preserve as much space as possible. The Brambles spawn, the firefighters have begun their job, everyone else swaps to the Brambles, and again, this phase kind of repeats. The 3rd Brambles, you do not need to actually focus here. All this stuff's going to happening again, repeat. 3rd Brambles, notably the boss pushes at 35%, so you can see we're actually just kind of leaving those Brambles, right? They're not actually a priority here. We're soaking, and we're just hitting the boss. And then at 35%, he pushes into Consuming Flame into phase 2 here. Notably for this intermission, it is quite scary immediately, and then it tapers off just because your healers need a bit of time to ramp. So you see we pop Bloodlust here, personals, big CDs at the beginning here, barriers going down as you can see, darkness, all those stack CDs, AMZ, Spirit Link if you have it, that kind of stuff. Very, very powerful here because you just want to be stacked for this. You know, if you need to use a healing pot if you're low, especially early on, make sure you do that. Otherwise, you just kind of have a bunch of free time here as DPS to absolutely pump and blast this boss down, right? Like, look how far we're getting him in this phase. Got a ton of Bloodlust time. And then out of this phase, again, according to your CCs, you may want to position the boss differently. Note that you won't need to actually do anything until after the first tank buster comes out. So I don't need to aggressively move. We're going to move over here after, but I'm just going to take the first tank buster first. In terms of new mechanics in this phase, so there's one change to the tank buster. So basically, when this goes out now, whenever I leech health from someone using this, it will put a stacking debuff on them, Ashen Asphyxiation, I believe it's called, and basically it just makes them take 5% more damage from this leeching effect, and of course that stacks up. Honestly, it wasn't a big deal. As long as you don't AFK on the raid as the tank, you're perfectly fine. So you're going to see here, I go in when I need health. When I don't need health, I move off the raid. And it's good to kind of give the tank some space here, just so they can do that. The other mythic mechanic here is Ashen Devastation. So let's see if we can get a view of those here coming out. Basically, it's just going to be an explosion. It's an 8-second dot, and here it is. Basically, it's going to go out on a single player here. Going to be an 8-second dot, and after those 8 seconds it detonates for raid damage. You can see there, that's what the animation looks like, and this is fall off damage. So what you need to do is you just need to run this out of the raid like so, and just make sure you are as far as possible. So because we're using this edge of the platform as our safe area, they run it out over there, so there's a few of them. Boom, detonation, big raid hit there. Decent spot to pop something like Rally if you have it, or something like that, just to help with that raid damage. It hurts quite a bit, and that's really like the scariest moment of this phase, is when that Ashen Devastation actually goes out. Otherwise, it's just like, you know, Heroic, you are dealing with the Prince being CC'd, which is nice. You don't have to deal with them actually walk in. Make sure you're soaking all of the orbs. These are tornadoes. Those are not soaks. Be careful. They look quite similar, so be aware of that. Otherwise, you know, you're just juggling the healing debuff with the tank busters and a weird tornado there. Make sure you get these soaks. These are the soaks, and they take quite a while. Don't leave these soaks early. Like, look how long these soaks actually take to detonate. So keep that in mind. We think we had like a wipe where those ended a little bit early, or we left one of those a little bit early. So keep that in mind. They take a long time to soak, but otherwise, this is very, very similar to Heroic with a little bit more tank stuff to worry about, and of course those bombs. But that is it, guys, for my Mythic LARODAR guide. Hopefully this helps your guild get the boss down, and if it does, be sure to subscribe for the channel for more boss guides, both in this raid and in the future into War Within. If you have any questions, leave those down in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer. Plus, make sure to check me out on my Twitch channel at Tactics, where I stream all of my Mythic progression here, keep pushing all that stuff from a tank PvP, so come drop by and say hi. Of course, I gotta give a shout out to my Patreon supporters. Could not do this without you. Otherwise, thanks everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.